Open your wallet and take out a dollar bill, a euro, a yen, or whatever cash you may carry. What makes it special? Why do people spend their entire lives hoarding it and spending it? Why is it so valuable? Money really is an oddity in our lives that we take for granted. In truth, it is the glue that holds the modern economy together. Yet, when you stop and think, money seems like a wildly intangible thing to define. Well, let's give it a try anyways. In this series, I take the most mundane, overlooked, or just plain obvious everyday things that we take for granted in our modern world. I break them down, look at them from the big picture, and share their fascinating significance for us humans. In this episode, let's talk about money. Money is inextricably tied to trust. Our willingness to accept a mere slip of paper in return for a physical good is based solely on our belief that we could then take that slip of paper and exchange it for another physical good sometime in the future. We put our trust in the slips of paper we call money, and we put our trust in the institutions that issue these slips of paper. In the most simple definition possible, we can call money the trusted medium of exchange. But this trust has not been constant. Throughout time, the trust between people, money, and authorities has changed. So, let's start in the distant past. In a previous video, I briefly mentioned how early societies exchanged goods through bartering. This was often the case in societies that lacked formal central authorities like kings, pharaohs, or emperors. However, in societies that were ruled by central authorities, money was often minted as a medium of exchange. This early money was far different than what we consider money today, though, as early central authorities would mint coins made of precious metals to serve as the medium of exchange. Why use precious metals instead of paper as we do today? Well, the trust between people, authorities, and money was weak. Central authorities lacked the capacity to enforce strict laws throughout the land and were regularly unstable. Therefore, people could not trust that central authorities could guarantee the money they minted. To make up for this lack of trust, central authorities imbued money with inherent value, such as gold or silver, so that even if the state no longer exercised control, the money would still be worth something. Now, this was more or less the status quo for the majority of early states. The evolution from precious metal coins to purely paper banknotes took centuries to develop. In fact, the first usage of paper money was during the 7th century in Tang Dynasty China, whereby slips of paper were used by merchants as a type of IOU. The practice of paper money would later develop and proliferate within China, leading to the later Song Dynasty government issuing true paper money guaranteed by the state in the 11th century. This paper money was guaranteed to be redeemable for a fixed amount of precious metals in the government's coffers. Now, it's no coincidence that paper money first developed in China. In the big picture of human history, China has long been among the most stable states with comparably impressive governing capacities, in which trust could be built between people, authorities, and money. Over the course of time, the idea of paper money spread all the way to Europe. There, the introduction of paper money closely coincided with the advent of central banks. That is, a government entity with authority over a nation's money supply, who acts as the guarantor for the value of paper money. The first European central bank was introduced in Sweden in 1668, and more famously in England during 1694. So, how did trust play a role in the adoption of paper money in Europe? Well, the 16th and 17th centuries saw an acceleration in the development of statehood. That is, European monarchs began to define what exactly a state is in terms of sovereign power over land and people, and how a state ought to be ruled. Throughout these developments, central authorities created greater governing capacities and more stability in terms of who ruled and where. Here, people, authorities, and money could build trust in one another, while central banks played the role of guarantor in such a relationship. As such, paper money became the norm, but it was almost always backed up by the central bank's guarantee that paper money represented some fixed amount of precious metals. Trust was not yet absolute, but growing. In such a context, the Federal Reserve was founded, that is, the Central Bank of the United States. While radically overshadowed by the Bank of England for much of its history, the Federal Reserve became an absolute heavyweight in the 20th century. The United States is an important step in this story as it exemplifies how money is intimately tied to trust in institutions and authorities. When people talk about the US as a global superpower, they may think of its massive military, its nuclear arsenal, or its huge economy. But what they may not think about is the role that the US dollar plays in the world. In short, the US dollar became the de facto international currency at the end of World War II. As a result, people across the globe began to use US dollars. Sure, it was the designated currency of multiple international organizations, but the US was also among the safest, most stable states in the post-World War era. People trusted the Federal Reserve would exist for the rest of their lives, and they trusted the Federal Reserve to guarantee each US dollar was backed up by precious metals. However, this also meant that now everyone holding a US dollar had a stake in the stability of the US, as the US dollar would be worthless if the country collapsed. This enabled the United States to exercise unprecedented international economic power, which continues to be exercised to this day. Now, over the course of the US's 20th century dominance, a paradigm shift took place in terms of the relationship between people, authorities, and money. In 1971, the US dollar became a fiat currency. A fiat currency is money certified as legal tender but without any intrinsic value. By this, I mean the United States went off of the gold standard and onto, well, nothing. After 1971, the only thing guaranteeing the value of the US dollar was the general stability of the US and the trust that your dollars would still be worth something in the future. This became the peak of trust between people, authorities, and money. People had to trust in the US government that their money was worth something simply because the government mandated it so. And it worked. Now, this is obviously an oversimplification. I do want to point out that the US government does still indirectly influence the value of the US dollar through the manipulation of monetary supply and demand. Think printing money or raising interest rates. Making money a fiat currency subjects it to forces of supply and demand, and central banks play within those boundaries. Yet, we also trust the Federal Reserve to play fairly within these bounds and act responsibly in their manipulations of monetary supply and demand. When we look abroad, the US is not unique either. Other major international currencies, such as the Japanese yen or the euro, are also fiat currencies that are regulated by similar central banks. Internationally, we have come to value our money based on the trust we have in authorities or institutions, devoid of any intrinsic value. When you really think about it, it seems pretty crazy, but it hasn't always been that way. In the big picture, money is intimately tied to the trust we place in the stability and efficacy of authorities, be that monarchs, republics, or central banks. Money, as a result, is a product of our collective trust in civilization. It is a belief that our systems of governance, order, and commerce will remain stable into the future. It is this profound trust we carry with us every day, but rarely realize. So, I hope this video made you think. I hope you'll have a newfound respect and curiosity for the trust you place in those paper bills cluttering your wallet. After all, money is uniquely human. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you. Please like and subscribe for more big picture perspectives. Just remember to stay curious. See you next time.